Hello, so this is sort of a spontaneous video, but I just want to vent a little bit. I'm a little stressed out now. I've been sort of multitasking, doing a lot of different work. I'm working on a course right now. It's very important. I want to pass it, but it's quite a big workload. But I'm also trying to sort out lots of ins and outs of other things. There's been health problems with a member of my family recently, and other issues, and I'm just trying to sort of pick up all these little things at once. But what I want to talk about is just I have touched on this before, but just technology in the modern world and how it's presented as helping life out, and I think more often than not it does. It keeps us in touch with people. It provides communication channels, and it can make things quicker when it's done properly and when there are not flaws. It can make things quicker than the old way. Say, for example, you had an old typewriter that kept jamming or something, then that would take an enormous amount of patience, and we shouldn't forget that. So technology has brought about a lot of convenience, but with that it's also brought about another dimension. Just consider for a second the number of times you have to use passwords, you have to create profiles, you have to create accounts. I was filling a job application, and I really want a job, so I was really putting a lot of effort into it. But it requested that I create a password and create an account, and it seemed pointless to me. I'm thinking, well, you've got my cover there, you've got my CV, I'm answering your questions, why do I need to create an account? And it just feels like a lot of things are made more complicated than they need to be. The amount that we use passwords these days, I tend to use the same password for most of the things I use. I'm all on Facebook, YouTube, but there's just so many things that you need passwords for now, and I understand there's security issues. I understand that there's shitbags out there that would, find fun in hacking someone else's information. And these people, I'm not talking about ethical hackers who are kind of, hacking big companies because they're trying to show unethical behaviour or something. I'm talking about just shit bricks that think it's funny to mess with someone's life. Just for a laugh. I really hate such people, to be quite honest. I think they're really low people. I just feel we always have this idea that technology makes things easier, but does it? All the time, does it? I think sometimes it just causes unnecessary stress. I've just got this new laptop recently, and this is great. My old one kept restarting itself, which was infuriating. God, that put me through an enormous amount of stress. So this one doesn't do that. That's great. But I'm also still having some setup problems with going through online tutorial, which then says something different than how my model is actually designed, and I just find myself sometimes thinking of a time with less technology. Was it more simple? I think every generation has its own challenges, so the things that we deal with today are not the things that people dealt with in the past. We don't have to put up with deadly diseases, at least not in developed countries, like malaria and smallpox. We didn't have to toil in factories for 14 hours a day and stuff like that, which, so life in the past was hard. We didn't have to go down the mines if you were a boy or a man. So there's things that have undoubtedly improved, but I do think sometimes, because the world is more interconnected, because technology is everywhere, that in itself can ruin our social life. It can connect people, but can also ruin a social life. If you've ever been to a party and everyone's got their phones out, I find that a very soul-destroying thing to see, because it's like, what's the point if you're at a party and you're just looking at your phone all night? And then I think with smartphones, it's not about a mode of communication. It's about a fashion statement. It's about, oh, who has the latest model? Why is your smartphone so small? You know, and my God, people are paying now as much for smartphones as they pay for a second-hand car. It's crazy. To me, that is absolutely insane. I mean, to me, the purpose of a phone is a mode of communication. And don't get me wrong, having the internet on your phone is a great asset. But again, it's all about, you know, contracts and passwords, and it just seems, I mean, another example, coffee shops that have these loyalty cards, these electronic loyalty cards. You know, give me those old-fashioned stamp ones any day. The electronic ones where you have to, Starbucks does it, Costa Coffee does it, you know, you have to register online. Why? Why do you have to do that? It's nonsense. I mean, I'm getting carried away here, but it does irritate me because I just think, well, okay, there's another password situation. And people might say, oh, well, it's simple, just use the same password. But then what happens? For some bizarre reason, they'll time you out. I'm not saying any specific website here, but you know, you'll have a password, then one day it just won't work. Have you forgotten your password? No, I haven't forgotten my password. Your bloody website just won't let me in. Then you have to go through a password reset. Then you have to activate that. Yeah, I'm ranting. I admit I am ranting here, but it's just a case of, does it really make life simpler? Do all these things make life simpler? I think the answer is yes and no. Yes, in the sense technology can enable us to do things that we didn't do in the past, and sometimes quicker if it's effective. But I also think it adds complications that we didn't have in the past about cybersecurity, about passwords, about all these things. And I find that a bit tedious at times. I find it a bit... I really think it's healthy in this modern age for us to drag ourselves away from the laptop, from the smartphone, from whatever it is, the iPad, and just go for a walk. Just, you know, see the world. And I'm no Luddite. I appreciate technology when it works. Believe me, it does have many merits. I know that. I've utilised it. But I do think there is a lot of peer pressure. I think there is this idea that you have to have the latest models of things. You have to, and so many companies nowadays, and they will argue, oh, we're just moving with the times, but is it them moving with the times, or are they moving the times? That's the question. I think it's a bit of both. I mean, you know, they'll say that you have to have an account for everything. Why? I mean, why do you need an account for Starbucks or Costa Coffee just to get your complimentary free coffee? You know, why do you have to go through all that password nonsense? It irritates me. Let me know your thoughts. Particularly, and I've noticed particularly in developing countries like India and China, you know, the peer pressure and the sort of image of it is even more so. So, you know, young Indians, young Chinese are absolutely obsessed with technology, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's totally understandable. But, you know, it's... When I was in China, I remember one of my students asked me my smartphone is very basic. It's got no special features. It makes phone calls, text messages, and when I've got Wi-Fi, it gets basic internet. But that is it. And I remember a student said, "Teacher, why is your phone so small?" And I said, "Well, it does what it needs to do. That's all I want it for." So I do think there's an awful lot of peer pressure, and I really feel sorry for young people who, pretty young myself, but you know, particularly teenagers who feel that, you know, maybe they're not from a wealthy family, they can't afford the best smartphone. And that's another thing, these things are not cheap. So that peer pressure, I think, can lead to bullying if people don't have the top model, or at least, you know, the trendy model, because not everyone can afford it, and that just adds some more pressure. But is it because they really need it, or is it because, oh well, everyone else has it, and if I don't have it, you know, I'll be laughed at? That's really sad. Let me know your thoughts.